Hi, everyone. I'm Paula Harvey, the Education Coordinator for Tejon Ranch Conservancy, and welcome to the second in our series of interviews with science professionals and the career paths that they take. So today we are going to talk with Mitchell Coleman, the science manager at Tejon Ranch Conservancy. Hi, Mitchell.
Hey, Paula.
So, Mitchell, can you kind of give us an idea of just a short, brief idea of what your job is at the Conservancy?
Sure. Well, every day at the Conservancy is a little bit different. It's can be one day out in a deep part of Tejon Ranch measuring a plant species or one of the many plots we have across the ranch, taking density data or doing a survey for some rare species. To the next day fixing a fence that got knocked over by a big tree fall, to the day after that cleaning the bathroom in the office. It's really a mixed bag, and it really keeps you interesting. It's a great place to keep you intellectually stimulated. Yeah, it's not no nothing is boring.
Tell us briefly about the background of your screen. Is that the
Oh,
ranch?
sure. Yeah, this is Tejon Ranch. So I want to move it to the side here a little bit. If you have heard that Tejon Ranch one day might be the future site of a part of the Pacific Crest Trail, and let's say one day that happens and you are walking the Pacific Crest Trail through Tejon Ranch, this is what you'd see. This is looking due north from pretty close to the high point of Tejon Ranch, about 6,800 feet, on Blue Ridge. Looking north and kind of right here, this central canyon here is El Paso Canyon, which is one of the deeper, longer canyons on the ranch from the high country here. So this little bare patch right here is called Lopez Flats. And just down from there, there's like a really beautiful incense cedar old growth forest that looks like Endor from Star Wars. And then this long perennial creek system that snakes through all the way to the San Joaquin Desert. And so it's just a phenomenal um, uh, canyon to hang out in. And so, yeah, and then we have Middle Ridge here on the left and Winters Ridge here on the right. And so it's definitely one of the more scenic vistas that you can possibly get onto Tejon Ranch, and it just goes to show. Yeah, we're looking right now actually at a pretty interesting diversity of habitats, from chaparral, arctostaphylos in the foreground there, to oak woodlands in the midground, pine forest up on the upper right on the north-facing slopes of Winters Ridge, to all the way to the San Joaquin deserts, like the annual grasslands, seeing some salt bushes over there. So we really are looking at the convergence of the four biological ecoregions we often discuss in the context of Tejon Ranch, and why it's such a cool place from a biodiversity perspective.
That's great. Thanks. I can tell just by listening to that short description of the passion that you hold for what you do. So, Mitchell, let's start with your educational background and how you got interested in what you're doing now. What is it you do?
Well, my path to where I am today is a little bit meandering. I never imagined I would find myself on Tejon Ranch. I did grow up in Bakersfield, which is the closest metropolitan area to Tejon Ranch, and so I have always known Tejon Ranch as a child. I did a few Boy Scout camping trips on the ranch as a kid. I spent a weekend on the fort learning how to make butter the old-fashioned way, and I've always driven through the area, but never imagined myself here. So this was not a planned scenario. Rather, my educational journey has been a little bit meandering. I was originally a pre-med in undergraduate. I wanted to be a doctor because both of my parents are in medicine. And so that was just kind of the path that was laid out before me. And that was where my mentoring base was. But over a period of 3 years in undergraduate. If anyone has considered being a physician before or is a physician, it's a pretty intense set of things that you need to do to in terms of your undergraduate coursework and your extracurriculars. It's pretty competitive. I was going through that process. I actually finished it, and I was trying to think about a way that I could make myself send myself a little bit apart from your typical medical school applicant. Most people who are applying to medical school are, they majoring in the sciences, but they've got a molecular biology background or a microbiology background. I was trying to think, how can I be a little bit different? And so I thought, ooh, I've always loved being outside. I love plants and animals. I'm going to major in environmental biology, which was one of the tracks in biology at my undergraduate institution. And so I began taking ecological classes as an undergraduate. I went to college over on the coast near Santa Barbara. And the professor who taught my first ecology class had been the director of taxonomy at the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden for many years, the director of education and taxonomy. And so her background in ecology was very much plant focused. We went all over the coast doing a variety of things. This was all new to me. And we ultimately went over to Santa Cruz Island and got to spend 2 weeks over on the Nature Conservancy's parcel there. If you've ever been over to Santa Cruz Island, it's amazing over there. And there's high rates of endemism. So there's plants that only occur there and nowhere else in the world. And for whatever reason, this was a seminal experience for me, that whole trip. And I remember standing underneath a forest of Santa Cruz Island ironwoods, which is in the rose family, Lionothamus floribundus. And it's a really, really, it's a tree. It's a really, really rare. It only occurs on Santa Cruz Island, and there's actually its sister subspecies occurs on Catalina Island, and yet they couldn't be more different. And for whatever reason, I fell in love with the morphology of the leaves of the Santa Cruz Island ironwood. I don't know what it was about it. It just jived with me. And I remember standing underneath that forest of these ironwoods and thinking, I'm going to be an ecologist now. I don't know how to describe my experience. In fact, I spent some time thinking I wanted to go on to be a farmer. I wanted to buy up a small plot of land and be like an organic farmer. But I pretty quickly got discouraged. I got scared of that notion just because it's a very hard field to break into. So I ended up going into professional ecology. So I completely abandoned the medical field, all my aspirations there, which was actually a huge weight off my shoulders. It just felt like kind of coming home. And so after I graduated from undergraduate, got my bachelor's degree, my wife and I moved home to Bakersfield. And I began working for some local, because I had no experience other than an internship at the Botanic Garden. I began looking into some early career opportunities, and so started working for some of the local consulting companies, biological consulting companies, picking up some experience in plants was really where my expertise laid. And I started the master's program in biology at CSU Bakersfield. And one thing led to another. And I began doing research, making connections, going to conferences, asking questions, doing my own research. And this was not long after Tejon Ranch became conserved. I mean, our organization, the Tejon Ranch Conservancy, just turned 12 years old this year. And so this was in like 2012, 2013. And Tejon Ranch Conservancy, Mike White was the director in those days, the science director. He was just starting to outreach to schools to try to get graduate student projects out on the ranch. And I got wind of an opportunity to do funded research out on Tejon Ranch, which was like, okay, cool. I've grown up around Tejon Ranch, but I've never actually been there into the heart. And so I applied for the grant and I got it. And so I got to be an intern at Tejon Ranch, hanging out with some of the Mike White and Ben Teton and other people, Laura Pavlisak, all my predecessors here, and getting to know them and doing my research, Ellery Mayance. And I did my thesis mostly on the ranch. And, you know, I'd actually planned on carrying on to do a PhD after finishing my master's. But the stars sort of aligned after I finished my PhD. Ellery called me one day and asked if I was interested in working at the Conservancy. And I interviewed and I got the job, and I've been here ever since. And frankly, it's kind of a shock to me that I'm still here, and I found my dream job so early on. I don't want to go anywhere. I'm here for the long haul. I am working on a PhD now, but it's entirely for the purpose of me being better at my current job, not so I can find some other job. So it's kind of there's details I'm leaving out, but I've probably gone into too much detail already. Um, yeah.
So, from what I'm listening to, what I gather is some of some of the things that you did weren't planned out. They were just opportunities that showed themselves, and you took advantage of them. And that's a good message to students to know that that journey isn't something that can necessarily be completely planned out, and you're just open to the different um, various routes that you might take until you get to your place.
Yeah, it was a combination of working really hard, and it is still a combination of working really hard. You can't, especially in this field, it's not laid out for you like it is in medicine. You have to seek out your own opportunities. You have to stand on your own 2 feet. You have to network and network and network some more. You have to know people. You have to present your research. I'm saying it in terms of have to, but it really is, if you want to work in conservation, it's about who you know. A lot of opportunities are not broadcast, on a job board somewhere. You have, you know, my position was never put on a job board, for example. It was just I was the right person for the job, and the stars aligned. So it was a combination of, yes, kind of the wind blew me here, but on the other, I had worked hard to be in the right place for the wind to catch me to take me here.
Yeah. So
And so,
you planned
yeah,
and set up by working hard and taking advantage of all opportunities. A lot of opportunities open up to you.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, Mitchell, tell us a little bit about the job that you have now. What is your, this interview is about careers in science. And so in terms of your job right now, what do you do?
Oh well, my official title is conservation science manager, and so really what that amounts to is, well, it's a bunch of different little things. Um, the big responsibility that I have, in fact, the big legally mandated responsibility of the Conservancy as the easement holder, which is the conservation easement, which is how Tejon Ranch is actually legally conserved. I am the easement monitor for the easements on Tejon Ranch. And so that's an annual activity that involves field visits throughout the whole ranch, which is, we're talking about 240,000 acres and, well over 170,000 acres of which is fully eased land. And so that's an annual activity where someone has to go out and monitor the easements every year. So that's what a lot of my time is spent doing, with the field component, going out and doing these surveys, as well as taking that data back to the office and writing up a report every year. And so every year is a little bit different. Go to different places, but that's a huge aspect of what I do. The other aspects are a little bit smaller. We, as the Conservancy, do a lot with habitat enhancement. And so this is actually, if you look on our website, we have something called the Ranch-Wide Management Plan, where the Conservancy and the landowner, the Tejon Ranch Company, have collaboratively and continue to collaboratively work together to enhance ecosystem function and biodiversity on Tejon Ranch in line with the landowner's current activities, cattle grazing, and so forth. And so there's a fair amount of work right there. One of the main cruxes of the ranch-wide management plan is riparian enhancement. And so we have across the ranch a variety of what we call exclosures, where we've gotten conservation funding to build fence lines around sensitive riparian habitats, creeks and springs and so forth. And we strategically manage cattle around these areas so that we can mitigate for invasive plant biomass. So, all these brown grasses right here are pretty much all invasive grasses. We can mitigate for them to increase native biodiversity using cattle as the tool, the mechanism by which we do that. So by strategically having cattle in certain exclosure pastures at some times of the year and then having them elsewhere at other times of the year, we can enhance the native biodiversity ecosystem function. And in line with that, which is largely a passive restoration approach, we collect data, in exclosures, which is kind of like a treatment from an experimental standpoint, and then outside the exclosures, which is a control. And so we've been pretty successful at riparian enhancement through the years. We also monitor the rangeland condition every year, the residual dry matter, which is this brown stuff behind me, for example. Another huge aspect of what I do is facilitating academic researchers. If you look back at the Conservancy's very short history, we've had some of the highest tier researchers in the field of ecology visit Tejon Ranch, characterizing conditions, looking at specific species, what their long-term outlook is, asking various questions from botany to wildlife biology, microbiology, you name it. And so a lot of those projects have completed now, but anyone who wants to do a research project on Tejon Ranch, whether it's a graduate student or a tenured professor who has funding for a specific question, whatever the case may be, I work with that person to go through the mechanism of getting approval to come to Tejon Ranch, and then helping them, acting as a liaison between the Conservancy and the landowner, as well as being kind of the boots on the ground knowledge of, where can I find Arctostaphylos glauca? Do you know any good populations? Yes, there's some good populations over on Bronco Ridge, and I can help pinpoint that. I myself, being kind of the generalist knowledge, but some of these people who come on to the ranch to do specific research are the real experts in their specific field. And so I guide them to where the good stuff is, and then they do even more specific stuff. So science and stewardship, easement monitoring. It's also, the Conservancy is like a little family. I mean, we have a public access manager. Paul, of course, is our education manager. So we all work together in various ways. I occasionally go out on public tours with people, go out on school groups. I'm working a lot now with Scouts BSA on some Eagle Scout projects to help us with our various programmatic needs, pulling weeds, for example. And then there's X number of little tiny sub projects that go on that there was no way we could ever be thorough enough to go on to talk about in detail, but those are the big things.
So this may be a difficult question to answer, but for those people looking at what you do, you're a field scientist. You're out in the field. What fun if they're asking you where certain plants are. You get to go explore and find things and then let them know. But could you give us kind of a rough estimate of how much time you spend doing office work, writing, recording, whatever, versus how much time you're out in the field?
That is a really difficult question to answer because it's so variable from season to season and from year to year. Broadly speaking, I would probably put it 50-50, but there's times of the year where I'll be like 16-hour field days and you won't see me at the office for like a month. But there's other, like right now, for example, I just finished up the 2020 easement monitoring. And so now I'm getting mentally ready to sit at my desk for like the next 3 months. I'll try to get out in the field at least once a day or once a week rather, because there's still some things that need to go on, but basically through the winter season when we live in a Mediterranean climate. It's rainy here in the winter, which makes all this stuff behind me basically inaccessible. That's a good time to be focusing on office work. And so I'm basically, for the next 3 months, I'm planning on spending more than 75% of my time either at home because we're in a pandemic or in the office. But when things open back up in the late winter next year and toward the spring, when the wildflowers start to come out, I'll shift that proportion back over toward the field side. It's kind of up to me, which is the beautiful thing. I'm a really independent person, and it's just up to me how I allocate my time, which is one of the things from a personal perspective I really love about working at the Tejon Conservancy.
Yeah, it's a very unique, special position. Not all positions like yours have that much freedom because if you're talking about a larger organization, you may be dealing with more, I don't know, bureaucracy and supervision. We're just about out of time, so I wanted to ask you if you have something that you would like to tell, students who might be interested in exploring the sciences, the field of science. What would be your advice to them?
Hmm, that's a really good question. I would say curiosity is the most important thing that you can have as a scientist. Never to lose that childlike wonder with the universe, because I'm somewhere between early and mid career. I've been a professional for 11 years ish now, since I kind of left the bubble of school. I'm still a graduate student, but I'm young. But I've already started to feel that kind of jadedness, that kind of world weariness, which I resent. I don't want to be that way. And so I have to remind myself now, you know, never lose that sense of curiosity, for science, for nature. To really be overwhelmed by the world, which the world is a really complex, confusing place. And so that's the single biggest piece of advice. From a more interpersonal standpoint, like science is not the days of lone wolf ecology, for example, are over. You really should be working with people. So you need to have collaborators, and in that sense, networking is really important. And if you're going to work with other people, we're a really sensitive species. We pick up on things like body tone and body language, and tact and timing and all these things. If you're going to work with other people, and this is a broad generalization here, scientists tend to be more interested in the science than other people, but it's really important to have people skills, to be able to sustain a conversation, to look someone in the eye, to shake their hands when we're not in a pandemic, to say hello, to say thank you. I guess that's a little bit old school, but I'm a little bit old school, I guess. um, just have to put the effort in, to go the extra mile, and to let other people know that you care about them. Like, we all care about other people, but we all have a limited amount of energy and goodwill at our disposal. So just you know, communication is really important, and you don't have to pretend like you know everything. Um, you know, early on, I had no idea what I was doing. There's still days like, I'm still figuring things out. And now I have the luxury of saying, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, so tell me, coach me. You be coachable. That's another important thing, is to be coachable, to be humble. Because that way it kind of takes the pressure off your shoulders to have to put on an act. It's okay. Let me tell you, I've been in the field long enough to know that even the high tier researchers who act all high and mighty, they don't know what they're doing a lot of the time. They're kind of just everyone's just kind of figuring some stuff out. So it's okay. You might as well be honest and talk about your shortcomings. That's the approach I take, and it just relieves the stress on me, to kind of just enjoy the science more, because I don't have to maintain this facade that I'm some perfect person. Nobody is. No matter how they present themselves to the world, nobody's a perfect person. Nobody has all the answers. So That's probably a specific answer, but there you go.
That's great. We're talking about curiosity, a sense of wonder, good interpersonal social skills, and humility. Kind of those things. Sounds great. I agree with you. And in any field, even in the field of education, you can be a master, but that doesn't mean you're done learning. Learning
Mhm.
goes on and on for your entire life.
No, yeah, you've never arrived. It's actually funny you mentioned that. I'm working on a PhD right now, and I'm taking an intro to graduate studies classes, which I've done a master's degree, but I'm learning all this stuff in this class. And one of the things that we were talking about was exactly what you just said. Wait, what was it, Paul? Could you say what you just said one more time?
Listing all those things, you mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Because
so curiosity, a sense of wonder,
mhm.
good interpersonal social skills, and humility.
And then you followed up with something that was
Oh, that
really
that in you're a lifelong learner. You're gonna learn
yeah.
time. You're never
Okay,
at the end of learning.
so today in class we were talking about time management. How do you manage your time as a graduate student? And so there were a number of professors on the call that were giving their little tips, which was all really helpful. But one person basically just said, you need to get comfortable with the idea of being uncomfortable. And she said, I'm probably going to retire and die with a to-do list. I'm never going to get it done. So get away from the idea of having of a sense of arriving. If you're a scientist, get comfortable with the idea of being uncomfortable because it's never going to get done. You're never going to answer all the questions. You're just going to ask more questions. And so if you're a person who wants to dot all your I's and cross your T's and kind of close chapters of your life behind you, well, science is different than that. At least true science. It's never done. It's a never-ending task.
Which is wonderful. It's just that I
Mhm.
think the wonderful thing about it that there and learning to me, obviously I'm an educator, but learning is something that I I I get a lot of pleasure out of, and science is a great place to learn. Thanks so much, Mitchell. Really appreciate your time and allowing me to interview. I hope this has been helpful to everybody, giving you a good idea of one of the routes that you can take, one of the many circuitous routes that you can take in the field of science to arrive where you are. Mitchell has a long way to go, and who knows where it's going to end up. But right now, he's in a place he really enjoys.
Mhm.
Very much appreciate this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paula. Appreciate it.